Good morning, Mr. Maseko.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Yes, you are still under oath, and Mr. Maleka will continue to put questions to you. Thank you, Mr. Maleka.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Maseko, can we go to Exhibit E again? E1. And please go to page 11.
I got it.
I'd like you to focus on the last paragraph of that page. And you will recall that in that paragraph you talk about a telephone call that you got from the official residence of the president.
Yes.
Can I ask you just to explain to us the nature of that call, as far as you can remember it?
Thank you, Chairperson. I got a bit of a cough this morning, so please forgive me.
No, that's fine, thank you.
So the date of the meeting with Mr. Ajay Gupta was set. I got into my car, and literally as I was driving out of the building, my mobile phone rang, and I could immediately identify the number because I had regular dealings with the president's office in the house in Mahlamadlovu. The person on the other end of the line was a lady, I did not take her name. She told me that the president wanted to speak to me. And I said, okay, that's fine. She put me through, or put him through to me. The content of the conversation is in the next paragraph. Should I proceed to that?
Before you do that, do you remember what time of the day you received that call?
Chairperson, this event took place about 8 years ago, but I remember that it was, my meeting was at 2 o'clock, if I remember correctly, with Mr. Ajay Gupta. So the call would have been around 1 p.m. or just after 1 p.m. in the afternoon.
Yes, the point is it was during working hours.
It was working hours, yes.
Right. Then you can proceed to deal with what, according to you, the president said, and you canvass those issues in paragraph 16 on page 12 of Exhibit E1.
When the president came online, we exchanged pleasantries, greetings, etc. And then the president proceeded to say the following in isiZulu. Mfoka baba, kunala madoda kwa Gupta, ngifuna ukuthi uhlale nabo futhi ubancede. And to those who are not very fluent in Zulu, I've translated as follows. My brother, there are these Gupta guys who need to meet you and who need your help. Please do help them.
Yes. Mr. Maseko, you said a little more about that conversation when the public protector interviewed you. Can I ask you to go to page 25 of Exhibit E1? And that's the transcript of the interview you had with the public protector, as I recall, on the 17th of July. There are some few aspects that I'd like you to highlight with reference to that conversation. If you go to page 25, from line 6, you will see that there are marginal numerical numbers on the left-hand column of each of those pages of the transcript.
Yes.
You will see there that what you conveyed to the public protector was the following. Oh, this was around 2010, I would say latter part of 2010. He requested a meeting, and initially I was reluctant because there were already some rumors around that they are up to some shenanigans, but eventually I agreed to meet them to just hear their side of the story, because already there were media reports that they were starting media companies, a newspaper and a television station. Yes, you said, so I said, if there is a new player in the market, let me go and hear their story. What was of a major concern to me is that on the day of the meeting, as I was literally driving out of my office building, I get a call from Mahlamba Ndlovu to say, and I wanted to pick up the rest as far as you can recall.
Yes, the next sentence, Chairperson, reads as follows. I was not surprised because my job required me to interact with the president, so there was nothing unusual with receiving a call from the president. It is the conversation that I had with him that became a major concern to me, because he essentially said, there are these Gupta boys who need your help. Please go and meet them, and they need your help, and see what you can do to help them.
In that portion of the transcript which you have read, you used the phrase major concern twice. Can I ask you this? Why was it of a major concern that the president would ask you to help the Gupta brothers?
Well, the first major concern I had was I already had a date with Mr. Ajay Gupta. I was going to the meeting. It was too much of a coincidence for me that as I was proceeding to the meeting, I then get a call from the president saying I must go and meet them and that I must assist them. So it demonstrated to me that what the Guptas, or Ajay Gupta in particular, was trying to do was to demonstrate that he has influence in the highest office of the land. And so as we were just about to meet, I should get a call to actually make sure that I understand what was going on.
Yes. Before this request, had the president spoken to you in any way about the Gupta brothers?
Chairperson, not even once now.
Can I?
I'm sorry, Mr. Maleka. Before this day, when you got this call from the former president, when he asked you to meet with the Gupta brothers and help them, had there ever been an occasion when there had been people who wanted to meet with you in terms of your work, and he had called you to ask you to help them or meet with them in general?
There has never been any other occasion where the former president asked me to meet any business people, Chairperson.
And after that call, from that day to the day that you left that department, GCIS, was there any other occasion when he called you again and asked you to meet anyone who had been wanting to meet you?
No other calls or day when the former president spoke to me. And in fact, as of my meeting with the Gupta brother, I think that there was less contact between myself and the president.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maleka.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go to something further you had conveyed to the public protector's officials during the interview, can I ask you this? We now know that the request was conveyed to you in Zulu, isiZulu. You have told the chairperson that you were effectively part and parcel of the presidency's office as the GCIS. Remember that?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, in that context, had you, at that point, when you're still part of the presidency, had some personal contact and discussion with the president?
On other matters?
On other matters, yes. And I'm talking official matters.
Jefferson, the nature of my work, particularly the one about being government spokesperson, did involve or require some contact with the president. For example, if there's a major cabinet decision made that I needed to announce, and would normally, with President Zuma, President Khalima, President Mbeki, I'll have a conversation with them to say, this is a decision, this is how I'm planning to communicate, this is the message, do you have any further input? And they will give me input. So there will be occasions when I would have to organize a press conference for the president and chair the press conference. I would then need to have a meeting with him prior to the press conference and plan, discuss the statement, and then facilitate, the press conference itself. So, answer to your question, yes, there has been contact.
The point is, in what language would you converse and talk with the president?
The language would be in English.
Why, in this case, did the president ask you a request in Zulu? Is there any significance to that aspect of the conversation?
Chairperson, I'm sure if ever the president gets an opportunity to come before you, he may explain it better. My assumption was that he was probably feeling much more relaxed, or alternatively, he wanted me to be more relaxed because of the subject he was discussing with me. But other than that, I cannot explain it.
No, but why would the subject suggest that you had to be relaxed when the president discusses it with you?
I'm sure he must have, and I can't speak on his behalf.
I'm asking you these questions because we don't know whether the president will come to testify. So you are the best available witness to assist the judge on this issue.
Well, it could be that he must have, Chairperson, suspected that the matter he was raising may not be a proper subject to discuss with a civil servant. So, but I'm just making an assumption here.
Yes. We now have your version. Can I ask you to go to page 26?
Well, Mr. Malega, I'm sorry, just before you go there, going back to what the former president said to you during that telephone conversation, he spoke in isiZulu.
Yes, Chairman.
And then you have provided a translation of what he was saying in English. I may be wrong, but I see that in the interview with the public protector, the translation may be not the same as elsewhere, but maybe the Zulu part maybe remains the same. I don't know whether you have noted anything along those lines. You want to be directed there?
I want to go to that paragraph and read and see it.
I think where counsel was referred you to, I think is it page 25? No, I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's page 25, lines 21 onwards.
Okay. So that's in the transcript. And you're saying, Chairperson, we must go back to the affidavit itself.
I was trying to look at the affidavit at the affidavit, but the one I read.
It's page 12, Chair, paragraph 16.
Page 12 of the affidavit.
Oh, okay, yes.
Paragraph 16.
Chair, you're correct. There is a difference of the English translation.
Yes.
But we would respectfully suggest that at this stage, nothing turns on that difference.
No, that may be so, but I want to ask something.
Yes.
the Zulu version of what he said may be the same wherever you have said it, I don't know. But I just want to go to the Zulu version. My understanding of what it says in English, and you can just tell me whether you think that would be a more correct translation. Well, Mfoka Baba, my brother, as you have translated, it should be fine. And then he says, Kunalamadoda kwa Gupta. There are these Gupta brothers or men. That's fine. Then he says, ngifuna ukuthi uhlangane nabo futhi ubancede. As I understand that part, it says, I want you to meet with them and help them. Would that be a more correct translation, or you don't think so?
The essence, Chairperson, is that he said, there are these Gupta brothers, I want you to meet them and help them. So it is possible that, in one paragraph I say more or put it slightly differently.
Yes.
But the message is essentially
The essence is the same.
that meet them and help them.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Maseko, can you go to page 26 of Exhibit E1?
I got it?
You'll see across line 7, Advocate Kanyani, who interviewed you, asked you to explain to him, or her, I think, whether the President elaborated in what manner you should help them. Do you see that?
Yes, I got it.
You remember she asked you that question?
Yes.
Can I ask you to tell the Chairperson what the response was to Advocate Kanyani's request?
My response, Chair, which still remains, is that he didn't say in what way. He just said, go and help them. And the conversation was very brief. If the conversation between me and the President took longer than 90 seconds, that would have been too long. But as soon as it was very clear that the call was to give me a message, and that was the end of the story. So he did not describe what exactly he meant.
And then, unless you want to say something about paragraph 17 on page 12, I'd like you to consider the contents of paragraph 18, because you begin to place in context your experience arising from that call. Do you see that?
Yes, I see it.
Right. And you say that you were taken aback by the call and wondered whether the Guptas had requested the President to call you to demonstrate their power and influence in the upper echelon of government. Did you have that concern immediately after the call?
Chairperson, I had that concern immediately after the call, because it was too much of a coincidence for me that I agreed to a meeting, and on my way to a meeting, I get a call from the highest office that says, go and meet these people and help them. There is no explanation in what way, but it just says, go and help them. So I took that to mean, and I could be wrong, but I took that to mean that it is possible that Ajay Gupta may have called the President and said, I'm meeting with this fellow, call him and just make sure that when he arrives here, he knows that you've got our backs, or something like that. But I'm assuming, because I don't have proof of that. So it was a major concern. I thought it was an attempt on the Gupta brothers, or Ajay Gupta in particular, to demonstrate his power and influence, so that when he puts the subject on the table, I would know that, in fact, he's got the backing of the highest office in the land.
You then said, you say you avoided jumping into conclusion arising from that coincidence, but you nevertheless went to the meeting with some trepidation. Those are those are your words that you use in paragraph 19. Can I ask you to elaborate a bit? Why did you have this trepidation?
Well, you'd recall, or Chairperson, you'd recall that yesterday I did testify about my concerns about the Gupta families and the rumors that were already circulating at the time. So I was initially reluctant to meet them. I then agreed to meet them, and on my way to meeting them, I then get a call from the president to say meet them. And part of me was, I think I lost my cool a little bit. I was in 2 minds. Part of me thought I should just pull out of the meeting and not proceed. But nonetheless, I thought I would not lose anything to just go and have a meeting and know exactly what was going on, because I was getting concerned about that. In any case, I say in the paragraph that I do meet with people from the media industry from time to time, and if these guys are going to be in the industry, there is nothing wrong in me meeting with them.
Yes. And then in paragraph 20, you then tell us about your arrival at the place. That is I think you describe it as the compound in Saxon World. You then say that you were greeted by security people who directed you to a car park to leave your car there. And then in paragraph 21, you say that you were welcomed into the house by a female. Can I ask you to describe to us in your own words, to the extent that you can recall, that part of your arrival at the house? I don't want to explain to you the significance of your own evidence. We have heard other witnesses who described how they arrived at the Gupta family house and how they were received. Can I ask you to share with us your experience about how you arrived at the house, who welcomed you, and what happened thereafter?
Sure, Chairperson, I'm glad I don't need to describe the furniture. It's not my strength. I got to the gate, was welcomed by the security personnel there. It was very clear to me that they were expecting me. They didn't give me any difficulties, so they just opened the gate. I got in, I was told to park next to the door, and a security person then took my car and drove it to a parking lot. So I then walked into the house, received by a lady who directed me to the lounge where the meeting took place. There were clearly security people all over the place in the yard.
And then in paragraph 21, you reference the name of Mr. Atul Gupta. Did you meet him on the day of your arrival at the Gupta family house?
When I was just about to take my seat in the lounge, the two Gupta brothers arrived, Ajay and Atul. I have never met Atul Gupta. He just arrived. I don't think he even had time to greet me. He just said a few words to IJ, and then he left the room.
How did you know that it was Mr. Atul Gupta?
I've never met him, but I've seen his photos in the media, and I can identify him.
Okay. But at that point in time when he came in, talking to his brother AJ Gupta, did you know that you are in the presence of another person called Atul Gupta?
Yes, I did that. And that's from media reports. His photos had been around for quite some time.
Yes. Mr. Maseko, before I canvass what you describe as a demand for advertisement budget, can I raise this with you? And if you have any information that you can share with us, please do. From the evidence of Ms. Mento, we know that she was taken to the Gupta family house around October 2010, if I do recall. Your evidence is that you received a request for the meeting round about a week or so after September or October. And you remember that you identify that date of September, October
Yep.
on page 10, Chairperson, paragraph 10.
I got it.
Now, it seems to me that on the evidence the Chairperson has received thus far, you are the second person who gets to be called to go to the Gupta family house more or less around the same time, and I emphasize more or less around the same time Ms. Mentor was there. In the context of that evidence, is there any reason you can think of why you were called to attend to the family at that point in time?
Chairperson, no, I can't think of any particular reason why they felt the meeting was at that particular point in time, other than the fact that they were on the brink of setting up a media company, starting with the launch of the New Age newspaper, which was scheduled to take place in the latter part of the year.
You see, I ask you this question, and if you can help us, please do. And Chair, with your permission, can I explain the context why we asked this question? I asked this question because we have sought to study and analyze models of state capture across the countries who have experienced that phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
In your own world of communication, politics, and of course law, you studied law, I know. Do you have any experience about state capture phenomenon which may have taken place elsewhere in the world?
Chairperson, I've been doing quite a bit of reading, and I've studied cases of what has happened in versions of state capture in Russia, in India, and elements of it in the United States. So it's a subject that I've developed some interest in. So to answer your question, yes, I have.
I take it that you have read the book called Once Upon a Time in Russia.
Yes, I did.
Yes. It too talks about state capture in Russia.
It talks about elements of how a state can be captured by powerful business people.
Yes. I take it that you are aware of the Peruvian model of state capture.
I'm aware of the topic, but I have not studied it in detail.
You see, Mr. Maseko, the Peruvian model of state capture is something the Chairperson will receive expert evidence on, probably from Friday, Chairperson. But its significance was that it involved the immediate access to the head of state, President Fujimori. And thereafter, the model was to capture the media houses. Now, in the context of that model, I'd like to ask you this. Why were you amongst the very first person to whom demands were made in order to support the Gupta media businesses?
Chairperson, in studying the Russia model, one of the things that is aligned with what you're saying, what the council is saying, is that the oligarchs have always tried to own a TV station because it's an important platform to influence opinion. But the question is, why did I think GCIS was, because I think it was, they were targeting GCIS rather than the person running it. I think that I would not give the Gupta brothers that credit, that they had a very clear plan to start with the media, and then move to a dairy farm, and then move to state-owned enterprises. It was essentially a question of identifying the hanging fruit. And because the GCIS entity was operating within the presidency, and they felt that influence rather than control over the president, it would be easy for them to access the resources that were located in GCIS. So my answer to you, Council, is that I don't think that this was part of some grand plan or strategy to say, this is our vision, we start with the media and we're going to proceed to that. It was essentially saying, we need cash. What is the quickest way to get cash? Let's get those entities that report to the person that we have influence over and take it from there. And I think that they probably surprised themselves when they saw how easy things came out for them in this country.
Thank you. Can I then proceed to the question of the demand for advertisement budget? You begin with that topic in paragraph 23 on page 12. And you explain how the meeting between you and Mr. A.J. Gupta went about. And in paragraph 25 on page 13, you begin to talk about the 600 million rand of advertisement budget. Can I ask you to elaborate on that part of your discussion with Mr. A.J. Gupta?
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. So there weren't too many pleasantries exchanged between us. At the start of the meeting with Mr. Ajay Gupta, he then started by telling me that they are, as a family, setting up a media company which will have a newspaper and a TV station. And key to their plan at the time was actually getting government support. And he did mention with things that I've not covered here, which may not be relevant for today, but worth mentioning, that he was aware that the ANC was also talking about setting up its own newspaper. But the ANC talks forever about things, they do things. So they're going to start with a newspaper, and they need the 600 million rands that GCIS is responsible for. That must be done through transferring all the funds, and they will place adverts and write articles and just make sure that the government message is communicated properly. So basically, he wanted the 600 million rands to be spent on the Gupta TV station and newspaper.
Mr. Maseko, in your interview with the public protector, you were a little more direct on this subject. Can I ask you to go to page 27 of Exhibit E1? And from line 1, you say, in the meeting, Mr. A.J. Gupta then cut to the chase. What do you mean by that?
I mean, he didn't waste time. After greetings, he said, okay, he seemed to be in a hurry. Okay, this is why I called you to the meeting. We want to set up a media company, and we need the budget that you're controlling. Yes. That's what I meant by cut to the chase.
Yes. And then from line 9, on the same page, you said the following. So in essence, if you look at the GCIS budget, you are not going to see an amount allocated for media buying for other government departments. And then you say, I was surprised that he knew even the amount that was involved. My question to you is, why were you surprised?
Well, Chairperson, as I explained yesterday, the amount that we spend on advertising, government advertising, is not a publicized figure. So it's not a number that people would ordinarily have in their heads.
And then you continue from line 12. You say, he told me he knows that there is 600 million available, and that the money must come to, and he specifically mentioned the New Age newspaper, which was coming. Can I stop there? Do you confirm that he mentioned the name of that publication?
Without any doubt in my mind, Chairperson, I do confirm.
Chairperson, yesterday there was some doubt about when the New Age newspaper publication was established. Can I just point out, Chair, that we have managed to locate the application papers in case number 47542/2018 in the High Court of South Africa, Gauteng Division, Pretoria, where the applicants included, amongst others, Afrotone Media Holdings, Pty Limited, and the application was for the liquidation of that entity. The founding affidavit was made by Mr. Mzwanele Jimmy Manyi, and in paragraph 4.1, the founding affidavit reads as follows. In June 2010, the respondent was established by some of the Gupta family members with the express objective of launching a national daily newspaper within the Republic of South Africa. 4.2, on about 6 December 2010, the respondent launched a newspaper with a national footprint and with a daily publication between Mondays to Friday, focusing on primarily local content within each geographic area and some national and international news of interest. 4.3, following its launch, the publication under the name and style, quote, The New Age, unquote, rapidly grew from a single national edition to 5 additional provincial editions in KwaZulu-Natal, Western Cape, Northern Cape, Free State, and North West Province. Chair, I have referred to all of these dates.
I just want to make sure I understood correctly what was said in what you read out. Is it that the decision to establish the New Age was taken in June 2010?
Yes, Chair.
But the actual commencement of the publication happened in December or later?
Yes, in December, Chair.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. And Chair, it's going to be a matter of importance when we present to you the revenue stream of all the monies paid by national and provincial government to New Age newspaper. But for now, I'd like to confirm with you, Mr. Maseko, that you are aware when the first edition of the New Age newspaper hit.
I may not know when the first publication was, but I know that it was end of 2010, either November or December, somewhere.
Yes. And so logically it means that when you met Mr. AJ and you're talking about the budget and how the money should flow to the New Age or other media interest entity of the Gupta brothers, the New Age newspaper had not yet been launched.
Not yet. No.
Yes. Can I then take you back to page 27? And I'm going to be a little quick. I'm going to skip some of the things that you had said to the interviewer. I would like you to go to line 17.
Got it?
Can I ask you, in your own words, to read that, and I'd like to ask you some few questions thereafter. Can you just share with us what is said from line 17?
Okay, this is Chairperson. This is what he said.
And that is Mr. A.J. Gupta to you.
Okay, Mr. A.J. Gupta said to me at the meeting, and this is after I had explained how the budgeting system works, and that GCIS doesn't sit with the total amount in our budget. It reads as follows: if you want to do any business, you must go and talk to the individual departments. That's what I said to him. And he just cut me short and said, listen, this is how things are going to work. Well, I said, it says is there, but he said, this is how things are going to work. You must go to all the departments, talk to the ministers, tell them to transfer the budgets into your account. And by account, I think it means GCIS account. And your only job is to make sure that the money comes to me and to the New Age newspaper.
Can I stop you there, please, if you don't mind? I mean, I read these things to suggest an instruction to you. How did you read them yourself?
Well, firstly, at this point, I think he had become a bit aggressive, and I did take that to be an instruction, which in my view was unlawful.
What was your job at that time, insofar as other departments are concerned? Was it your job to go and get them to transfer money to your department, to GCIS?
This is the part I was trying to, Chairperson, this is the part I was trying to explain to him, that it's not my budget. I do not have the power or authority to instruct a minister or a director general of another department to transfer any money into the GCIS account. And as far as I know, even National Treasury could not instruct a department to take money from its account into the New Age newspaper.
And I mean, what strikes me also is that he says, your only job is just to make sure the money comes to me in the New Age newspaper. Now, as a matter of fact, was that your job?
No, no, sir. No, Chairperson.
It seems to me that someone is rewriting your official duties.
He was basically giving me an instruction which I found totally unacceptable and unlawful.
Then can I ask you to continue where, and I'm sorry to have interrupted you, from where you say, I said.
Okay, my response to that statement from him was that, unfortunately, Mr. AJ, this is not how things work. But if he said, if I have other, and there's a dash in the transcript, and I presume he would have said other problems or anybody giving me problems, or difficulties with any of the ministers who are refusing to transfer their money to me, I must come back to him and he will call those ministers to order and he will make sure that they deliver. I said, Mr. AJ, but these are my leaders. These are my ministers. You can't talk to them like that. You can't talk to them, talk about them like that. I clarified further. He said, no, and I quote, that is how the system works now. If there's any minister who's not cooperative, I tell him, and by that he meant tell President Zuma, and he sorts them out. I did ask him how will he sort them out. He then volunteered information that he, as Ajay Gupta, has regular meetings with the president, and that if there's a minister who's not cooperating, the minister is then summoned to, and I'm just clarifying, that's not in the transcript.
Yes.
I'm explaining what happened during the conversation. So if he speaks to the president, the minister is either spoken to by the president or summoned to Saxon World, where they're given an instruction about what to do. Essentially, that's what transpired.
You were asked by Advocate Kanyani whether you asked Mr. Gupta during your meeting, how would they be able to sort out ministers who might not well cooperate with you? That question was put to you in line 9. What was your answer?
my answer, and it's captured in the transcript with the public protector. His response was he has regular meetings with President Zuma, so he will talk to the president and the ministers will be summoned to. The transcript says indistinct, but I can clarify that it meant Saxon word. And they will be instructed to transfer the budget to him. The meeting just ended like that, Chairperson, because I just did not agree to that. And I said, okay, let's end the meeting here. He was extremely angry. I left the house. My car was brought back and I drove out. This is what transpired.
Yes. You see, up to that point, you were not asked any question about what Mr. Gupta said to you about the regularity of meetings he held with the president. But elsewhere in the transcript, you were asked those questions and you explain your version. I'm going to jump to page 46.
Is it 36?
46.
46, okay.
I skip lines 1 to 8, lines 1 to 8, and ask you to pick up your version from line 9. Line 9.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Malaga. Is on what page is that?
Page 46 of
46.
E1.
Thank you.
Okay, can I ask you to pick up your version, Mr. Maseko, from line 9?
Okay. Line 9. And just for background, this was now following a discussion about, what was happening in the house there. In page 46 on line 9, the question was, because he was boasting to say how often he was meeting
When
with
you say
ministers
he,
and
who was
all.
posting?
Apologies, Chairperson. Ajay Gupta was boasting about the frequency of meetings he had. So the question was, how often did he say he meets the president? My response on line 9 says, he said the president comes to their house for dinner at least once a week. He told me that much, and that ministers regularly come to the house, but other than that, he didn't discuss anything further. So.
I take it that by that time, you had a clear picture of who Mr. A.J. Gupta was.
Chairperson, at that time, I did have a very clear picture of what type of a human being I was dealing with.
Can I come back to the lines that you skipped? I skipped, and that is line 1 to 7. You raised a different subject. Can I ask you to explain to us in your own words what you conveyed to the public protector at that point in time?
Okay, just which page, which line?
Page 46.
46, yeah.
Yes. Lines 1 to 8, 7.
Lines 1 to 7. Okay. He did mention that he already was getting a lot of business from SABC, breakfast that they arrange with ministers. The question was which breakfast. I explained that the new age breakfast that are broadcast on SABC. And he was doing this to try and show me his influence. He has weekly, or they have weekly meetings with the president.
Right. Mr. Moussaka, unless you have any further issues to raise in regard to that part of the transcript, I'm going to go back to your statement, and I am going to go back to page 13.
Mr. Malaga, before you take him back,
Yes.
You have said that Mr. Ajay Gupta said to you that the former president used to have dinner with them weekly, and that he said to you that is now Mr. Ajay Gupta. He said to you that they summon ministers I don't know whether you said when they don't cooperate or however you put it, but they summon ministers. Now, during your time at GCIS or during your time as government spokesperson, did you get to know of any ministers who got summoned to the Gupta house at any stage?
Chairperson, there were a lot of rumors in government corridors that a lot of ministers were visiting visiting the Saxon World compound. I may not have proof of that, but there were reports in the media.
Yes.
And these stories were also mentioned in one or two books that were published.
Yes. Would you also may have known of any senior government officials such as DGs being summoned to the Gupta house? I know you didn't talk about DGs being summoned, but I'm just asking because DGs would be accounting officers in government departments.
Yes, Chairperson, there were again reports of DGs also either visiting or having meetings or being summoned to Saxon World compound.
Yes. No, thank you for that. It's just that if the evidence is ultimately accepted that this is what was said to you, and no ministers have come before the commission to help the commission to say we were summoned or we did have meetings at the Gupta house a number of times, and these were the circumstances, and we went there willingly, or we felt that we had to go there because of this and that and that. If they will not have come before the commission to help the commission and the nation to understand the depth of state capture, it will be very, very unfortunate. So I'm hoping that to the extent that there may have been ministers who were summoned, I'm hoping that they will come forward and help the commission and the nation to understand what was going on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Chair, we're grateful to that question and the concern you raise, and certainly we would ask the investigators to follow them up. Some of the ministers, as you know, have been lined up to come and testify before you.
Yes.
And no doubt they will be asked those questions.
Yes.
And they will put their versions on you.
Yes.
But can I ask for leave to follow up on your question now that we have at least one witness here who has given you a version?
Yes.
And I do so at the request of my learned friend, Mr. Mukwena.
Yes.
You see, Mr. Maseko, at page 28, line 4, you say that in the course of that conversation with Mr. A.J. Gupta, he said the following to you, and you put it in code, or the transcript puts it in code. And I'm going to read it as transcribed. Quote, no, comma, this is how the system works now, close quote. You see that? Are you with me?
Yes, yes, I'm with you, Chairperson. Sorry.
Did you appreciate what system was Mr. A.J. Gupta referring to?
Well,
Which was not there, but which was going to work from that point onwards?
Chairperson, the impression I got from the conversation was that we were in a state where there was a parallel state in place, a parallel system of government, where decisions about procurement and other government decisions were now taken in the compound. And by system, he meant that's how things work. He issues an instruction to whoever works in government. If you don't comply, you are then summoned to sex and world. And the other reprimand you, or he, Mr. Gupta, or one of the brothers reprimands you. And if you still don't cooperate, then they pull out the big guns. And these big guns, in my view, would be the president at the time. And that's what he meant by, this is how the system works now.
Yes. Mr. Maseko, in paragraph, well, page 13, exhibit E1, page 13, paragraph 29, go into page 14, paragraph 30. You draw some conclusions there. It's up to you whether you want to repeat them or elaborate on them. If there's anything further you want to say, well, say them now.
Just refer again to the right paragraph, page
13.
Page 30.
Paragraph 29. Go into page 14, paragraph 30. There are some conclusions that you draw there. I wonder whether you have anything further to say in relating to those conclusions or arising from them.
Okay. Up to paragraph 30, I think that covers everything.
Yes. Then I'd like to explore paragraph 31 with you.
Yes.
You say, I also reported the incident to Mr. Frank Chickeny, who was a former Director General in the Presidency. Do you see that?
I see that, yes, sir.
As far as you recall, did you report this incident to him?
Yes, I had a discussion with Reverend Frank Chickeny about this incident.
Yes. You say a little more about persons that you reported the incident to, in addition to Reverend Chickeny. You explore that in the transcript in the same volume E1, page 28. Can I ask you to go to page 28?
Yes, I'm there.
And then opposite line 13, sorry, line 14. No, let me pick it up from 13. You say, I said, okay, let's end the meeting here, but I was extremely angry. Do you see that?
I got it, yes.
Can I ask you to take up what follows thereafter?
I then immediately called my minister and said, this is what just happened. And he said, no, he'll take care of it.
Who was your minister at that point in time?
At the time, it was Minister Collins Chabane. Unfortunately, he was late, Chairperson, so may his soul rest in peace. But yes, he was my minister at the time.
Yes. The late Minister Chabane was your minister at the time.
Yes, he was.
What official ministry did he occupy?
He occupied the position of minister in the presidency.
And then you also explain other persons that you reported the incident to. Can I ask you to go to page 47 of Exhibit E1?
I got it, I'm there.
And please go to line 8.
Yes, I got it.
And there you say, I had a brief meeting with the Deputy President on the matter. Which Deputy President do you refer to?
Chairperson, Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe.
Which matter are you referring to?
That was with regard to my interactions and pressure I was getting from the Gupta family.
Then you say, I had a brief meeting with the DG in the presidency, Frank Chickeny, at the time to say this is what is happening. We have dealt with that issue insofar as paragraph 31 of your affidavit is concerned. And then you say, well, the question is asked to you by Mr. Kubo, who was part of the interview. And the question was, so, Reverend Frank Chickeny and obviously former President Moussaka, I think it's a
Motlanthe.
Motlanthe. Do you think they will be in a position to corroborate your story? Do you see that?
Yes, I got it.
And then you give an answer there. Can I ask you to explain to the chairperson in your own words the answer you gave?
Just one thing I'd like to just correct. It should have said former Director General in the presidency, because I think he had already left, but
Yes.
I spoke to him. I also spoke to Joel Nechitenze, who had been head of policy in government. I also spoke to my former minister, Mr. Esopahad, and and that's why if you go to my affidavit, Chairperson, you'll see that paragraph 31 says, I also reported the incident.
Yes.
It doesn't say I reported.
Yes.
It says I also. So the omission on paragraph 31 is that it says also but doesn't say who else.
Yes.
And that's the reason why I'm exploring these questions with
Yeah.
you, to try and give the chairperson who falls in the bracket of the also
Yeah.
referred to in paragraph 31 of your statement. And before I ask you about whether they did anything after you made the report to them, can I ask you to go to page 51? 5-1 chairperson. And again, it is Mr. Kubo who is asking you questions on this issue. And he's asking you questions around then Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe from line 21. You see that?
Yes. Yes, I see that.
Can you just explain to us the question and answer?
Chairperson, the question was, what was his take, President or the then Deputy President Motlanthe on the matter? My response, and still is, that he did express, when I was speaking to him, he did express shock and surprise, and I think a bit of disappointment. But the response I got from him and all the people that I was speaking to was that they shared the concern about what was happening with regard to the role of the Gupta family. So They did give the assurance that the matter was receiving attention at the level of the National Executive Committee of the ruling party, and I was satisfied that if at least that handling it politically, the matter should be sorted out.
Yes. Mr. Moussaka, I'm now going to move to a new topic that you call the call. On page 14 of your statement.
Okay, I'm there.
And let me read paragraph 32. You say, on or around the end of November 2010, I was driving to the Northwest Province for a weekend getaway. Okay. I take it that you recall what weekend getaway that was.
Yes, I recall that. Yes, sir.
Can you just share with us, if it's not intimate and private?
You want to know the venue?
Where were you going to?
To Sun City.
What were you going to do there?
How, Mr. Malega?
I think the people of Northwest were missing me, so I was visiting. But in short, Chair, there was a golf tournament I was going to watch with...
Chair, on a serious note, you'll see why this is important.
Okay, all right.
You will see, because in anticipation,
Yeah.
you will see that Mr. Maseko was not prepared to sacrifice that weekend getaway. But we'll come to it. So if you may give me some indulgence to ask Mr.
Well, so it
Maseko.
might not just have been the people of Northwest missing him. He must have missing them too.
True, yeah. But it's up to him whether he would like to disclose those matters before you. My view and my humble request is that although there are matters that would ordinarily be private, they have acquired a dimension of public importance in the light of the testimony you will hear from him in due course. And if you're willing to tell us, that's fine. If you're not, we will leave it on the description of a weekend getaway to the Northwest Province.
Now, I've already spoken about the subject in public, so I can speak about it, Chairperson. I was going to watch the Netback golf tournament in Sun City, and that the relevance of that is that it's going to help me if it becomes necessary later to remember the exact date of that call, if this matter were to proceed beyond this commission.
Let's anticipate that issue. As far as your consent, when in time and space did that call happen?
The first call came, I would say, early hours of the evening, around 5 or 6, on a Friday evening, as we're driving to the tournament.
Yes. And then you say, I received a call from an unknown gentleman who said he worked for the Gupta media company. In parentheses, the term is used loosely herein to refer to the media company set up by the Guptas for their print and / or TV venture, close bracket. Do you recall the name of the TV venture that you have referenced in bracket?
At the time, they had come up with a name for the newspaper, which was the New Age newspaper.
Yes.
I don't think they had finalized the name of the TV station.
Right. And you say, the gentleman requested me to meet the following Monday at 8 in the morning to discuss government advertisement in the soon-to-be-launched New Age newspaper. Do you see that?
I see that, Chair.
Yes. Now, in context, I mean, you had already had discussions with Mr. A.J. Gupta on this and the government support he desired or demanded in relation to the New Age newspaper. So this was not a new subject that was raised with you. Are you able to tell the chairperson whether you recall the identity of this caller?
I can't recall, Chairperson, I can't recall whether he identified himself by name, but he did say that he was the person in charge of setting up the New Age newspaper. I subsequently discovered that his name was Tony Gupta, who was the person given responsibility to set up the newspaper. But at the time of the call, I wasn't sure who I was speaking to. I can confirm that it was somebody with a very strong Indian accent. Couldn't recall the name at the time, but.
And in paragraph 34, you say he insisted. Well, I'm sorry to skip paragraph 33. Let me go back to paragraph 33. You say, I told him I would meet with him, but that he should call me on Monday morning to set up an appointment as my diary was already packed. In this regard, I wished to ensure that whilst I would listen to any proposal, this had to follow proper procedures and had to be done on a proper basis. Why did you, this time around, take the view that any meeting of that kind had to follow proper procedures and had to be done on a proper basis?
Chairperson, in short, I was now aware what the family was up to, and I wanted to make sure that proper procedures were followed this time.
And then in paragraph 34, you say he insisted that the meeting had to take place the following Monday, as the launch of their newspaper was imminent. Now, your words are quite interesting. You say he insisted. How did he insist?
The call started, Chairperson, is just a normal business call. Hi, I need to meet with you to discuss. The newspaper was just about to launch. Can I meet you on Monday morning? And he had the time, 8 o'clock. My response was, okay, look, yeah, we can meet, but it will not be at 8 o'clock because I already have other commitments. But you can call me or my office on Monday and we will schedule a time to meet with you either that week or whatever. Because in my mind, it was very clear that my program schedule cannot be determined by the agency of his business. I had a business to run, and he needs to fit in with the rest of the other priorities I had at the time. He then insisted that Nana, they were launching, the launch was quite imminent and they needed advertisements to be placed. And that's why the meeting had to happen at 8 o'clock. And I said, no ways. Call me on Monday. If you can't call on Monday, there's not going to be a meeting on Monday morning.
And you say the call ended unceremoniously.
Well, yeah, it ended with me saying him, okay, and me saying, okay. That's how it ended.
What happened after that call?
Literally, it was, I would say, between 45 minutes to an hour later, my phone rang again. And this time it was, Chair, I think that it might just facilitate if I can just explain everything
Yes.
in one show without waiting for a question. Phone rings, second time during the drive to Sun City, and this time around it was Mr. Ajay Gupta. He says, James, that's what they called me at the time, or everybody called me that. I hear that you are being difficult, or my people tell me that you are being difficult. I said, no, Ajay, I think your people are misinforming you. I'm not being difficult. Your people call me, your person calls me this evening, once or demands a meeting on Monday morning. I said he must call me on Monday. I said I was not going to meet. I did not tell him I was not going to meet him. I said he must call me on Monday to arrange a meeting. And then Ajay says, no, this is very urgent. You have to meet him on Monday. I said, no, Ajay, I told him, as I'm just about to tell you, it's not going to happen on Monday morning. It can happen at any other point, but not on Monday morning. And then his response was simply that I can see you're being difficult. Okay, the meeting is not going to happen on Monday. It's now going to happen tomorrow morning, which was a Saturday morning, at 10 at my house in Saxon World. I said, listen, AJ, firstly, I don't work for you. You can't give me an instruction. If you want a meeting yourself, you call me. I then went on to relate to him that there are other ANC people who work in government, ministers who own newspapers. And at the time I was thinking somebody like Tokyo Sekhwale, and it's covered in the affidavit. And I said, they own media houses. They never give me instructions. They never give orders to me. They never demand meetings. So you've got no right. I don't work for you. You've got no right to give me an order to meet in any case. Tomorrow happens to be impossible in any case because I'm out of town. He says, no, I can say you're being difficult. This is where he makes the comment that he can see that I'm difficult. He's going to speak to my seniors and he'll make sure that I'm sorted out and he'll make sure that I'm replaced with people who will cooperate. And I must say the conversation went south beyond that point because he was obviously upset. I was obviously a little bit more upset than he was, but that's what transpired.
Well, you say that all of that detail is covered in your statement.
Yeah.
But can I remind you that all of that detail is covered in your interview with the public protector, especially from page 30.
Yeah.
From, for example, line 17, going forward, and you explain how you're upset. In line 31, and opposite line 5, Chair, there is a description that I would not use, but...
I'm sorry, what page are you now on?
Page 31.
Yes, and what lines?
Line 5.
Yes.
Well, let me read
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I would not read it, Chair.
Yes,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
thank
But
you.
it reflects
Yeah.
the mood of Mr. Maseko at that point in time. Yes. Mr. Moussaka, I'm going to ask you something that flows from line 6. There you say, come Monday, nobody pitches up in my office because I didn't agree to meet. But during the course of that week, I was getting a lot of calls from heads of communication departments who were complaining that there is somebody from New Age newspaper who is demanding to have meetings with them, and what should they do?
I'm sorry, Mr. Maleka. Please, Mr. Maseko, remember the question he has just put to you. Don't forget it. But I just want to go back a little bit.
Yes.
When Mr. Ajay Gupta said to you he would speak to your seniors, who would have been your seniors at that time?
Chairperson, seniors would have meant my immediate supervisor, which was the minister in the presidency. But because of the telephone call I'd received from President Zuma, I assumed that he included President Zuma in that. So my minister and the president.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Something strikes me that I should follow on that question of the Chair. I hope, Chair, you don't mind. Yes. Why do you think that your seniors would be approached?
Well, he put it that way in the telephone conversation. He said, if I don't cooperate, he will speak to my seniors who will then sort me out.
Yes. Can I then go back to the question that I had put to you? It arises from page 31, I had read lines 6 up to lines 11. You can read it, and when you're done, I'd like to ask you 1 or 2 questions.
Okay. You read the first part, Chair, so I'm
I've
just
read it.
going
You
to read
don't
the
have to
latter.
read it. You just read it quietly. I think
Okay.
we should avoid
Oh,
burdening the
okay.
record. Yeah.
I'm done.
You're done.
Yeah.
Are you able to tell us who are the heads of communication who raised their concerns at that point in time?
Chairperson, this is quite a difficult matter because speaking on these matters is something that each individual must make a choice about because it has serious personal implications for individual concern.
Are you
So,
able to tell us who they are, even
At this
confidentially?
stage,
Confidentially, if you want to.
we could have a conversation with the investigators and see if that's going to be possible.
Yes. But for now, on the record, there were people who raised concerns with you, who were government officials, heading different communications departments of our National Public Service.
Chairperson, I can confirm that several heads of communication from different departments were approached by the very same individual whom I discovered to be a Tony Gupta later on, was making calls demanding that they place advertisements in the New Age newspaper, which was going to be launching at the time soon. And in his conversations with them, he said he had spoken to me about it. And that's why in my response, as captured in the transcript, is that I said, my advice to them was that they should just ignore them. Nobody can demand a meeting with you. If you're not available to meet, you're not available. Yeah, so that's the story. So I said, any impression that anybody gives to them, that I had given authorization to the Guptas to call them to demand advertising was completely unfounded, wrong. They must make the choice whether they want to meet them or not.
Thank you. That issue will be taken up with you by the investigators. But you say that you advise them to ignore this person.
To ignore, but if they choose to meet, they must meet, but they must do so not with the understanding that it has my blessing. In other words, I'm not meeting with them any blessings from my side.
Yes. And then in paragraph 46 on page 16, Chair, I'm going to skip the rest because they have been dealt with by Mr. Maseko.
Yeah.
At page 16, paragraph 46. You say, during my tenure at GCIS, there were no dealings or contracts between GCIS and the Gupta family or any of their companies that I'm aware of. You see that?
I see that, Chair.
Do you confirm that that did not take place?
I would confirm that as far as I'm aware. I would confirm that.
Yes. Thank you. Then, Chair, the next topic that I'm going to explore is what is described as my exit from the public service. Do you see that, Mr. Maseko?
I see that, sir. Thank you.
Again, to facilitate your evidence, can I ask you to deal with that issue at once so that I should not interrupt you?
Yeah.
You begin at paragraph 47, but just summarize that issue for us in your own words, beginning from paragraph 47.
Thank you, Chairperson. This is the topic dealing with my exit from the public service. Towards the end of January 2011, and I managed to, Council will be pleased, I managed to get the date of that meeting. working out the events from the internet.
Yes.
The call was on the 30th of January, 2011. A Sunday morning, the minister requested a meeting with me that afternoon, but unfortunately, I was not available that afternoon, so we agreed to meet the following morning, which was the 31st. The meeting took place, as I said, on the 31st, and the content of the meeting was essentially the minister informed me that he had received a call from President Zuma, who was out of the country at the time, and the president had instructed him to redeploy me or terminate my contract. And in fact, the words that he used is the president said to him, by the time he returns to the country, I must not be at GCIS. The minister then, and this is covered in paragraph 48, the minister then said he had no choice but to implement this decision because the president is his boss. But he then made a commitment to me that he was not going to throw me into the streets because he knew that I had not done anything wrong and that I was, I used the words committed civil servant in the answer there. He said he'll make a plan to find another post for me in the public service. He said he was aware that there were quite a few vacancies, so he'd make a plan. So we concluded the meeting by him saying he's going to talk to his colleagues in cabinet to see who was in the market for, or these are my words, in the market for a DG. The following Wednesday, which was on the 2nd of February, 2011, then a cabinet meeting took place. And in my role as government spokesperson, I sat in cabinet meetings so that I could listen to the decisions and then prepare a media statement and make a public announcement about what cabinet had decided. During the course of the meeting, I was then informed that the ETV news channel, I think they call themselves ENCA now, but it was ETV then, was running with a news item saying that I had been fired. I then, because in cabinet meetings you're not allowed to take your mobile phones in, so we locked them outside the meeting. So I went out, took my phone and did some checking, called my office, and my media people in the office confirmed that yes, there was such a news item running. I then immediately brought this to the attention of Minister Javani to say, there's this story going. I know that you and I had had a conversation. You are going to look for a position for me. And in the meeting, my understanding was that I should stay in the post. The minister was shocked to learn that such a story was running because he thought we were still in negotiations. But he promised to come back to me within minutes. He wanted to check with the president.
So the president was still outside of the country at this stage?
Now, at this stage, this was the Wednesday, he was already in the country.
Okay.
And in fact, he was chairing that particular cabinet meeting. Okay. So the minister said he will go and check with the president if this was correct or not. The minister came back to me to confirm that yes, there was such a move. And I said to him, look, he needs to consult with the president because at the end of the cabinet meeting, an announcement has to be made because the media people were already bothering me with calls to find out is this true or not. So the minister then went back to have a chat with the president and then came back. Unfortunately, we were not able to meet then. Came back to the cabinet meeting, which was already in session. And at the end of the cabinet meeting, the president announced that Minister Javani wanted to make an announcement. Then Minister Javani was given the platform in the cabinet meeting. And the announcement was to the effect that I've been removed from GCIS and that I'd been replaced by Jimmy Manyi. as the new government spokesperson and CEO of GCIS. And he then said he was aware that there was a vacancy, well, not in the announcement, but in the announcement, he then informed the cabinet that I was the DG of DPSA, which is Department of Public Service and Administration. And he then, after the meeting, informed me to report immediately.
His announcement in the cabinet meeting was that you were removed from GCIS.
Yes.
And that you were already the Director General of
DPSA. I was going to be, I had already, yeah, I was the new DG of DPSA.
Yes. And at that stage, I'm sorry, I want to know this. At that stage, was it coming to you, were you hearing this for the first time in terms of being confirmed that you are the DG of that department, or were going to be, or had you already been made to understand that, yes, you will be? So what I'm trying to say is whether when he spoke to you on Monday, and I thought he was going to explore other options for you. But now in the cabinet meeting, he seems to be simply saying either you are already the DG of that department or you are going to be. I'm trying to,
Okay.
How much of that did you know before the cabinet meeting in terms of certainty being DG of this other department?
Chairperson, at the end of my meeting with Minister Javani on the Monday, he was going to look for alternative positions for me. The announcement about my removal was a surprise to both of us because he was still looking. And I must give credit to him because I think he bent over backwards. Because had he not done that, it would have meant after the announcement of my departure, I would have been in the street, literally. So, and that becomes relevant because at the end of the cabinet meeting, unfortunately, the minister at DPSA was Minister Richard Baloyi, who happened not to be at the cabinet meeting. An announcement is made. I had to call, and it became clear to me later on that Minister Javani had not had the chance to speak to Minister Richard Baloyi about this. So I had the misfortune or the privilege of calling Minister Javani to tell him that I was his new DG.
Baloyi.
I mean, Minister Baloyi.
Yes.
That I was his new DG. Minister Baloyi was equally shocked because he had not had the chance to speak to anybody about it.
Well, that's the angle I was trying to explore because it seemed to me that the announcement of your removal happened before the time that you and Mr. Chabane were expecting it to happen because of the pressure from the media.
That's correct.
And I was wondering whether in making that announcement at the cabinet, actually there had been communication with the minister of the department to which you were going. So it seems that, from what you are saying, it seems that Minister Baloyi may not have known that he was going to get a new DG.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So the cabinet meeting concluded, an announcement is made, and I immediately moved over to the Department of Public Service and Administration.
Chair, there are two last issues that I'd like to converse with Mr. Maseko. I can do them now. I'm sure I should be able to conclude them in 10 minutes.
I think you may go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, Chair, all of the concerns that you've raised with Mr. Maseko relate to the legal requirements of how a Director General, at the level of his employment, would lawfully be transferred from one department to another. The number of legal requirements, I'm not going to bother you with them because I have been asked to assure you that Ms. Hofmeyer will deal with them quite properly, timely, and contextually when Ms. Williams testify before you. But insofar as Mr. Maseko is concerned, I'd like to raise a number of matters that might well reflect on those legal processes, because ultimately we would suggest to you that they reflect how the wish and the will of Mr. A.J. Gupta was effectively executed without regard to those legal processes. Mr. Maseko, you've told the chairperson how the announcement relating to your removal from GCIS to DPSA took place. First question, were you consulted about that removal?
Chairperson, I was not consulted about that specific removal to DPSA.
Yes. Are you aware that insofar as the legal processes are concerned, you were entitled to make representations whether or not the removal or transfer should take place?
I was still on contract. If we were dealing with a normal situation, I would have had to be consulted and asked if I agreed or even given an option to consider other options within the public service, but that did not happen. And for that reason, Chairperson, I think that it's prudent for me to say that my minister at the time was bending over backwards, may have broken a rule or two, but his intentions were noble indeed. Because he knew that if there was any lapse of time, I would have been deemed to have been out of the public service, and a transfer would have been much more complex. It would have led to a legal dispute, which he thought was not warranted, and that's why he did what he did when he did it.
As far as you're concerned, are you aware whether any consultation took place between the two ministers? That is, the late Minister Javani and Minister Baloyi?
Unfortunately, Chairperson, I can confirm that there was no such discussion, because when I phoned Minister Richard Baloyi to inform him that I'd already made the announcement that was his DG, he expressed shock in my first meeting, because I was calling him to say, when can we meet? I'm your new DG. He expressed shock and irritation that he was never consulted. A lot of it had to do with the fact that he was not at the meeting. I can also confirm that there was a very good working relationship between Minister Chabane and Minister Baloyi, and that could be the reason why Minister Chabane thought he could take such a risk and then have a conversation later with Minister Baloyi. But as far as I know, based on the conversation I had with both ministers, there was never consultation between the two of them prior to the announcement.
Other than the announcement in Cabinet, other than the media reports about the shift and changes in your status, did you receive any official communication confirming that you have now been removed from GCIS and you are now the new Director General of DPSA?
None of that happened. I never got a formal letter formally transferring me to DPSA.
What happened after you got to DPSA with Minister Baloyi, who, remember, you said he was shocked about your installation as the new DG of his ministry?
The relationship, Chairperson, the working relationship got off on a very bad note because the minister, as I said, was not consulted and was not impressed with it. It took a few days for me to secure a meeting with him. Eventually, we did meet. And I said, look, I'm going to try and do my best to support you and work in this department. But he clearly stated that things were under control in the department. He introduced me to the various deputies. But the situation became very unpleasant. I think that the first 3 months, we did not have or manage to have regular meetings. This is Minister Baloyi.
I'm sorry, did you say very unpleasant?
Very unpleasant.
Okay.
Because he felt he did not have a choice in who was his DG. But I stayed on for about 3 months. It became very clear that he had continued, because he had not had a properly appointed DG at the time. He continued to work with the Deputy Directors Generals, what we call DDGs, in government speak. And I just felt I was not needed in this place. We then started the conversation. I said, look, Minister, this is how things are happening. One classical example would be that at that time, there were serious negotiations taking place between government and the unions about salary increments. And all those discussions were taking place in the building, and I was not invited to those meetings. So it became very clear to me that I did not have a role to play in the department. So I said, Minister, I think we should talk about my exit from the public service, because I feel I'm earning a salary, but I'm not doing any work. So he said, okay, he'll speak to the president and they will make a plan. In the meantime, that is then, I don't need to come to the office every day. I can stay at home, but he'll make sure that the negotiations with the president are expedited. A few weeks later, he came back with a letter and an offer saying that the president had agreed to the terms of the offer. And that's how we concluded the relationship. I was given the offer and I exited the public service. We can get the date. I think it must be around July. I've got it somewhere in this pack.
Yeah, you do give a date in your statement.
I think counsel for Mr. Maseko is trying to assist you.
What page?
Chair, this is at page 2 of his CV. That is page 2 of Exhibit E1.
Oh yeah, it's July 2011.
Yes. Mr. Maseko, the last chapter of your experience with GCIS that I'd like to briefly explore in conclusion is do you know who was your successor?
Chairperson, the issue of my successor was part of the announcement at the cabinet meeting. At the time, it was announced as Mr. Jimmy Manye. I believe his name is now Mzwanele Manye. But that was announced at the cabinet meeting.
Yes. The point is, did you meet him in order to hand over your responsibilities in GCIS to him?
Unfortunately, no, Chairperson. There was no formal handover because the way the decision was explained and implemented was that the decision was effective immediately. So I had never had the opportunity to hand over to him. I never even had the opportunity to pack my office. That's how urgent the move had to be, because my office told me that there was already an issue, literally the next day after the cabinet meeting about parking. They needed to know if they needed to give him access to the parking, to my parking bay in the building. So I had to be out of the place, so there was no time to
You know, Mr.
hand over.
Maseko, we were not there, and it's important that you should try and give us a picture of what happened. Did you have any occasion to go and bid farewell to your staff members?
That sounds a bit familiar. Chairperson, I never had the chance to say goodbye to my staff. I think that the last time they saw me was when I had finalized the statement for the cabinet meeting and had to exit the building. So I never got a chance to say goodbye to my deputies, my staff. Although my staff did try, I must give them a bit of credit. They did try to organize a farewell party. I think I may have declined it, but I think they did try.
Chairperson, that is the story of Mr. Maseko related to GCIS. I don't think I have any further questions to put to him, but I would ask your permission to confer with my colleagues in case I missed something in my enthusiasm.
Yes, you may do so. I do want to ask Mr. Maseko a question or two as well. At the time that Minister Chabane told you that former President Zuma had told him or instructed him to redeploy you or terminate your services, how long had you been in government service?
All in all, Chair, I would estimate that I'd spent 17 years or so in the public service, in different capacities, in different departments.
Does that exclude or include the time you spent as a member of parliament?
I do include.
Okay, all right.
I do.
Let's exclude the years you spent as a member of parliament and count just those years when you were attached to a government department or another. Would that be easy to do?
We can work it out. The last time I checked, I think it must have been something like, it's between 15 and 17 years. It covers from being Director General of Public Works, short stint with the Department of Public Service and Administration. It covers a very long stint as Superintendent General, which is Head of Education, Gauteng Department of Education.
And GCIS,
And
of
then
course.
there's of course GCIS, yes.
And
So we can work it out.
And how long had you been at GCIS at the time Minister Chabane told you this?
I had been there from 2008 to 2011.
Would that be about 5 years, 4 years, 5 years? More or less?
About 3 years.
About 3.
Yeah. And what makes that question even more important, Chairperson, is that at the time when the contract was being redetermined, or at the time when I was moved from GCIS, there were only a few months left in the contract.
Well, I was going to come to that
okay,
to
my
say, yeah.
apologies, yes.
No, but it's good to say how much more time of your contract was still left when you actually got told by Minister Chabane that President Zuma who wanted you to be redeployed or your services to be terminated. You say it was about 3 months?
I think it was longer, Chair. It probably was...
Less than a year?
Less than a year, certainly. I think we calculated the other day, it came to around 7 months.
Yeah.
But we've been trying to, with your team of investigators, trying to get a copy of the contract because
Okay.
it's so
Yes.
long ago. But I'm not sure if we're getting enough cooperation from the DPSA to get a copy of the contract.
Okay, no, that's fine. Well, if there are difficulties, I'm sure the Commission's legal team would let me know if there is no cooperation coming forward. So, during the time that you were at GCIS, did you, throughout those years, occupy one position only?
Yes, Chairperson, one position, CEO and
yes.
government spokesperson.
Yes. During that time, or let me rephrase that, do directors general get their performance assessed from time to time by the ministers or whoever to see if they are doing well or not doing well?
The Directors General assessed on an annual basis
Yes.
by the minister, who's normally assisted by other ministers. So it will be a panel of 3 people.
Yes.
And they may invite another DG from another department. So there is a process for assessment. I can't confirm that it happens in all the departments all the time, but that's the process.
Yes. Now, from what you have told us, Minister Chabane wasn't convinced that the decision that you should be removed from GCIS was correct or fair, because you say he said he knew that you had done nothing wrong.
He put it in very clear words to say he did not agree with the decision.
Yes.
But he was simply complying with an instruction from his boss.
And he being basically your supervisor, he would be one person that would be that would know your performance as DG of GCIS or the position you were holding, as to how you had been performing.
Without a doubt, sir, he would be the person.
During that time, or let me first ask this question, during your time at GCIS, was Minister Chabane always your minister, or had there been somebody else at some stage earlier who was your minister?
Apologies. I had a total set of 3 ministers during my tenure.
Yes.
The first one was Minister Esop Pahad. Then there was Collins Chabane. The third one was Ms. Manto Shabalalam Simam.
Okay. During Minister Chabane was your minister from when to when, if you are able to remember, or for more or less how long, if you are able to remember, out of those 3 years or so?
I can work it out. I don't have the dates offhand.
But do you know whether he was your minister the longest compared to the other 2 or not?
I think the longest would have been with Minister Esop Pahad, the first minister.
Yes, the first minister.
Reported to.
Yes.
The one with Minister Collins Chabane was short. And the least number of months, I think, would have been with Minister Manto Shabalalam Sima.
Yes. Now, if there is a performance problem on the part of a person occupying the position of Director General, such as you occupied, what would normally happen? What would normally happen? I assume that he would be, or he or she would be informed about areas of concern in his or her performance. Is that the position, or is that not?
The position in government, and I presume in the public-private sector as well, is that if there are issues of performance, the minister or CEO in charge cannot just sit in their office and decide that this person is not performing without following due process and terminate. So in government, the way it works is that there would have had to be a process, and if the process finds that the DG is not performing, a report will then be given to the president with a recommendation from the minister to say, this person is not performing, and I recommend that they be removed from their position. Unfortunately, the period that your commission, Chairperson, is dealing with, there are a lot of directors general's contracts that were terminated. I would say less than 5% of those terminations had to do with performance. The bulk of those dismissals had to do with either differences of personalities or a new minister being appointed and feeling that they want their own person to be appointed. And as a result, the public service has suffered a huge brain drain over the past, I would say, 2 decades. Because very capable directors general, and I'm not including myself, very capable directors general have left the service, are in the private sector now, and the public service would have been in a better position if we had retained those skills since 1994. I think we'll be stronger. There have been less instances of poor service delivery that we're experiencing in the country at this stage. Short answer to your question, process would have been a minister recommends to the president that person A is not performing, and then a decision is then taken that the contract needs to be ended, and then there will be formal discussions, either disciplinary process or whatever, but there will be a formal process.
And at that time, the contract between a director general, would it have been, would a contract of employment involving a director general, would it have been between that person and the minister, or would it have been between that person and the president?
The process, if I may beg your intelligence, just to explain, Chairperson, the initial process was, it was a contract purely between the Director General and the Minister. They would sign. If there's termination, it's just between the two of them. President gets informed. But there was a time, I think 10 years into our democracy, problems are starting to emerge between ministers and their Directors General. And there was a feeling within government that we needed to get a third party to mediate this relationship, because a lot of DGs were being fired. I would imagine some for good reasons, others could be that a DG did not agree to the signing of a particular contract, and therefore they get terminated. So the view was that let that be a contract between the minister and the DG, but with the concurrence of the president, so that the minister knows that if they want to terminate, the president has to be in the picture. But in my time in the public service, I don't recall a decision being taken by the president to say this DG is fired without the involvement of the minister in that process, to make sure there's understanding of the reasons, agreement on the process, et cetera, et cetera.
And in particular, your contract of employment, was it with your minister?
The signed contract in all cases would be between DG and the minister.
Yes.
So in mine, it was contract with the minister. And the minister who would have signed it would have been Minister Esop Bahad, because Minister Javani found me in the post.
So in your case, your contract was with Minister Chabane, even though it would have been signed a few years earlier by Minister Esopahad, but Minister Chabane would simply have stepped into the shoes of whoever had been the minister before him.
That's correct, sir.
And you say Minister Chabane simply made it clear he did not agree with the decision that you should be removed from GCIS.
I can confirm that, Chair.
And during your time at GCIS, was there ever any complaint by any of your seniors, if I can call them that, about your performance?
Not even once, Chairperson.
Nobody ever raised any issue with you about your performance at GCIS?
No, nobody raised it with me.
Yes. And
I might just add that there would be cases where, as the communication arm, we issue a statement and the minister would be unhappy with that statement and
But
saying we
nothing
should.
really-
But other than that,
Yeah.
there was never a performance issue raised.
Yes. And in terms of misconduct, you were never called to any disciplinary process because of any allegations of misconduct at GCIS?
Chairperson, at GCIS or in any of the departments where I worked,
Yes.
and if there's a file that says disciplinary action against me, that file is probably empty still today.
Yes. So the picture that you have conveyed to us is therefore that as far as you are concerned, nobody had any dissatisfaction with your performance in terms of your seniors, as you said, and then you were told that the former president had said to your minister, your services must be terminated or you must be redeployed, and your minister made it clear to you he didn't agree with this, but he had to comply, and that is effectively what happened.
That's correct, sir.
Am I right to think that from what you have said, namely that Minister Chabane said to you, the president said he must either redeploy you or terminate your services. Am I right to think that this must mean that the former president may not have minded you continuing in government, in some government department, but he did not want you to continue as head of GCIS?
As Chairperson, as it was communicated to me by Minister Collins Chabane, the president said, by the time he arrives back into the country, I should not be the head of GCIS. It was as specific as that.
Yes.
It might be Minister Chabane's own interpretation to say, if he didn't want me in GCIS, he wouldn't mind me elsewhere. And that's how Minister Chabane could have interpreted the instruction.
But if that was his interpretation, it probably was correct, because he announced at cabinet that you were the new DG for another department, and you haven't told us that there was any complaint from the former president or anybody that you were still within government.
That's correct, sir. When the announcement was made, there was a surprise in the meeting, but no complaint from anybody about my going to DPSA.
So it may be that the problem was you being head of GCIS.
It is easy to come to that conclusion, and that's the only conclusion that I came to.
Yes. No, thank you. Mr. Malega, you had wished to consult with your colleagues?
Yes, Chair. I see that we have gone past tea time. Is it convenient to get back to tea time and resume?
Okay, all right.
There are some announcements that Mr. Pretorius may want to make.
Well, if there won't be any further questions for Mr. Maseko, would it not be convenient that we deal with those announcements and then, because if we are going to be adjourning,
Yes.
but if there will be some questions for him or some other business other than announcements, then maybe we can adjourn and come
Chair, I
back.
don't have further questions to Mr. Maseko.
Yes, yes.
I think,
Yes, maybe, but you would rather ask that we adjourn and come back.
Yes, because my colleagues may
Have
some
okay.
some issues that.
Okay, no, that's all right. We will, well, before that, Mr. Maseko, there will not be questions for you now. We contemplate that Mr. Maseko would come back some other time, isn't it?
Yes, Chair, for cross-examination to the
Yeah.
extent you allow it.
Yes. So we can excuse him for now, and arrangements will be made for him to come back at some stage in the future. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Maseko, for coming. You will be excused for now, but the Commission's legal team will be in touch with you or with your attorney and counsel to arrange for when you can come back again.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. We'll take the short adjournment now and resume at 5 to 12.
Thank you, Chair.
We adjourn.
can't find my phone.
Yeah.
Oh, you there? Okay.
Ubrapho lwayengaba phone. Marika? So still the picture is not on yet. Oh, okay, here's the picture. Okay. Guys, I've got 2 minutes. I've got 2 minutes. Eish. What is that? What is that in this? Eh? Eish. It's not gonna be, no, it's not gonna be possible. But yes, that. Yes, I was going to speak to Themba Maseko, but it's cut pelil. No, Lalel, it's not going to be possible. We are going back at 5:2. I wanted to speak to Themba, but it's cut now. It's pelil. It's fine. You guys can cut. We won't be able to come to me now because each judge will walk in the next 1 minute. No. At 5:2, you can take the proceedings. Yeah, because it's cut. It's pelil. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. May we adjourn then, subject just to the following two information announcements. The first is that at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Ms. Williams, the Acting Director General of GCIS, will testify. She will be led by Advocate Hofmeyr. I'm informed that a bundle of the relevant documentation will be forwarded to your office this afternoon. And then at 3 p.m., Drs. Hellman and Kaufman, international experts on the concept of state capture, will be testifying by video conference. Again, I'm informed that a bundle of relevant documentation will be delivered to your office today.
Okay.
So may we adjourn then.
Thank you very much. That is what will happen. We adjourn then until tomorrow, 10 o'clock. We adjourn.
That was really very thorough. Thank you.
Kate, we're going to meet for 5 minutes back there.